Welcome again, participants. This is Dr. Abhishek Nath on this particular course on human rights. In first lecture, in first part of my lecture, I discussed about what are rights or human rights, and I talked about three kinds of rights: natural rights, legal rights, and moral rights, and how they are related to human rights. Right, and then I also talked about its historical evolution in very short. In this next part of this lecture, I'll be talking about this evolution of rights and their division into three different categories. Right. Generally, in the last lecture, I talked about the rights are emerged uh, in continuance with the emergence of the modern state. Right. See, modern state, modern state, the emergence of modern state was a highly contested phenomenon. The modern state that we see today, we live in today, is actually immersed at a particular place and a particular place and a part in a at a particular junction of history, the juncture of history, right? So its evolution is very contested. And actually, the evolution of modern state and the evolution of rights go hand in hand. Remember, with the limiting of the powers of the king, despotic kings, when the people of the court only enjoyed the rights and rest others have no rights or barely or very few rights. In 17th century, 17th, 18th century, when this the despotic, the authoritarian regimes, we are moving from the authoritarian regimes to the modern regimes. People, the middle class that was emerging in Marxist system, we call them bourgeois class. They're emerging. They actually demanded the equal rights with respect to the people in the court. What they were enjoying, they should be equally distributed to these people. So these people actually asking about, they were trying to limit the powers of the state. They want to a free movement. They want no punishment without trial. So such kind of rights were known as civil rights. Civil rights. So these civil rights, and then the political rights. That means who should be the king. People should also be this middle class demanded that they should have rights over the covenants or the documents through which a king should rule upon the subject, on the people, right? So such demands actually led to this first generation of rights that we know as civil and political rights. So this equal civil position with respect to the king and their court has the roots of emergence of these civil rights. So civil rights are the first category of rights, and actually, if you go in detail, you will find that they will emerge through different, different charters and different declarations. And these charters and declarations are what? Are actually the demands of the emerging middle class against the state. They want to limit the power of the state. They want to do free movement, free trade and commerce. They want a clear and explicit conventions or covenant through which kings should rule. And if the people violate those rules, then only the punishment should be assorted to. It's not upon the will of the king that they can do. The king do whatever he thinks. It's not like that. The middle class started demanding such kind of equality with these rights, the equal treatment with regard to the civil uh, liberties. So the civil and political liberties related to civil, these political rights, these political rights are also related with these civil rights, because actually these are first kind of political demands that they also want their share in the rule making, in the rule. Because coming to coming to the terms for a legal document, for a legal covenant upon which kings should have right to rule, developed through these demands. So the civil and political rights are actually formed the first generation of rights, and they are actualized during 18th century. Remember Hobbes, Locke, and Rousseau, the theories who propounded the theory of social contract, they actually talked about these things. And these are actually formed the base of the modern state. Because from here, the king's divine right to rule has been contested. Remember Hobbes. Hobbes clears all these nonsenses that king has right to rule, divine right to rule. And he actually secularized the king, right? That through the natural rights, through these contracts, actually people decide who should rule and why rule, on what terms they should rule. This is known as this theory of political obligation. Why should I obey the state? Because the state will provide us certain liberty. A state will provide me certain rights, and right to life and personal liberty, right to choose who should rule. These are the basic rights. The first of all, people and the king consented upon. So these are the first generation of rights, civil and political rights. Remember these rights, the Magna Carta of 1915, the English Bill of Rights 1689, then the Bill of Rights of USA Constitution 1789 that was approved in 1791 by different states in USA. And finally, the French Declaration of Rights of Man and of the Citizens in 1789 that popularized the ideals of liberty, equality, and fraternity, right? So these are called the first generation of rights. Remember, the basic characteristics of these rights are that these rights are negative rights. Negative in the sense because they try to obstruct the state, they try to limit the state, they try to limit the rule of the state to certain aspects, right? So these are limiting the power of the state. So these are negative rights. These are also known as blue rights, and they actually form the basis of whole liberal philosophy. The whole liberal rights, where individual gets primacy and freedom, individual and its freedom gets primacy, is the base bedrock of this liberal thought. So these are called liberal rights. In this human right discourse, this first generation of rights are claimed as fundamental and non-negotiable. That means these are the minimum, the minimum standards of rights. These first generation of rights are that create that standard that are actually we cannot move below that standard, right? So these are form the very basics of the rights. So any state, anywhere, they claim that this civil and political rights should apply universally everywhere. Now we move to the second generation right. Remember one more thing that Karel Vashak, who actually categorized these three generations of rights, first, second, and third generation. And the basis of this categorization was this French Revolution, the ideal of French Revolution: liberty, equality, and fraternity. Remember, the emerging middle class demanded liberty, demanded certain freedom from the king. So the first generation of rights, the civil and political rights, are mostly the rights that create, freedom from the unjust rule, right? The freedom from the excessive rule of the state. So these are liberating. These are liberating rights. So liberty, the term liberty and freedom generally used interchangeably, but liberty, the term liberty has certain historical, understanding. So that's why, liberalism and liberty, it shows how people liberalized, how the state was liberalized slowly. So liberty is more historically situated term, right? Historically loaded term. If we talk about the second generation of rights, remember, second generation of rights are the rights uh, that are demanded and fought by the people of lower class. You can say the labor class, and for them, the economic, social, and cultural rights are more important. They actually, the second ideal of the French Revolution, the equality, that actually forms this basis of second generation of right, because the labor class demanded the equal treatment with respect. They wanted equal distribution of the freedom or the rights enjoyed by the king, their court, and the middle class now, right? So they wanted the liberalization of these rights further, right? Further to the people at the lower rung, at the lower level. But for them, their economic status, their social status, and their cultural rights are more important, because it's not only life, but livelihood is also very important. And livelihood is directly attached to your work, your right to work, your right to food, your right to shelter, your right to education, your right to opportunities. So the second generation of rights are actually the rights that are demanded by the labor class, and they demanded the rights more. They want these rights to be distributed more equally, should not only be enjoyed by the two classes, but the other classes also, right? So an important thing the important thing to note here is that, the Marxist revolution, the socialist revolution, the socialist ideas actually popularize these things. So uh, uh, with the emergence and with the popularization of the socialist movement, they actually form the basis of the second generation of rights. These rights are though recognized very little late in 20th century, late 19th and 20th century. These are called red. These are also known as red rights. Remember, the first generation of rights are known as the blue rights. Uh, and one important thing attached with these rights is that these rights are positive rights. Why positive? Because uh, they they actually demand some positive intervention from the state. Unless and until a state provide opportunities and provide uh, social security with respect to education, with respect to food, shelter, and other things that actually form the fundamentals to enjoy other rights. If you are not, uh, if you are not, your livelihood is not secured, your food and shelter is not secured, you won't be able to enjoy your other rights. We cannot say that you have civil and political rights, you just enjoy it. Unless and until you have social equality, you cannot enjoy the civil and political rights equally. Many a time, if you take the example of India, you will find that the people who are at the lower level of social strata, uh, put it more clearly, if those who are coming from low caste, they're also at low class also. And we know that people at the lower caste cannot enjoy many other rights, civil political rights equally. Until recently, they are forced to not to vote or to vote a particular party, right? Their votes are, they are through coercion or through economic incentives, their votes are purchased, right? they are forced to vote to particular party. So unless and until you are socially and economically at equal position, you cannot enjoy your civil rights, civil and political rights equally. Right. So economic and social rights, creates that foundation upon which civil and political rights can be built, can be enjoyed. However, those who support the first dimension of rights, especially the liberal scholars, they will say that the civil and political rights are more basic and other rights will follow. So the second generation of rights are mostly the positive rights. Positive because the state intervention is required. The state need to create the conditions through which people can enjoy these rights. So they are positive rights. Remember, in India, we find there are many organizations, NGOs, who especially meant for civil and political rights. If you remember, the PUCL, People Union of Civil Liberties, then PUDR, People Union of Democratic Rights. These are the organizations. They actually operating in India for the civil and political rights. Remember, even after independence, this is the fact that people in India do not enjoy even the civil and political rights equally. The people who are more influential, or upper rung of the upper level of the caste and class system, they enjoy these rights more freely than many other people, right? So social exclusion, happens. So so first generation of rights, the second generation of rights, and now we are moving to the third generation of rights. So see, third generation of rights, these are neither taught in the liberal tradition nor in socialist tradition. The third generation of rights mostly are group rights. Group rights means until now, whatever we talked about the first generation or the second generation of rights, these are mostly the rights of the individual. They recognize people as individual and the rights as individual rights. Right? But the third generation of rights are the rights in which groups, the rights that are enjoyed by the groups in collectivity. For example, right to self-determination, right to self-determination. That means we should have our own government. No one other has to rule upon us. No outsider or foreign power has power to rule upon us. And this right to self-determination actually forms the basis of this decolonization, the whole decolonization of third world. So the third generation of rights are the rights that are collective rights, and they are also the rights who talks about the quality of life. For example, can we imagine, if you take an example to understand these things, people in Delhi, mostly in this in recent times, in this season actually, when winters are coming, we find that environment is polluted, and it's very difficult uh, to breathe in these situations, especially the children and or the old people. So they are actually, your life is not only about just living the life, it's about leading a quality life. And that quality life could only be possible if you have a better environment, if you have a clean environment in which you can breathe, right? So nowadays you will find that in many societies, people are demanding that there should be a park in their society. There should be maintenance of recreational things where people go and enjoy. These are all forms the part of quality of life, right? And such kind of rights actually are collective rights. These are the forms the right, they try to solidarize, their rights to solidarity, because they require solidarity among people. So in that sense, this third generation of rights are actually the rights of future generation. Because if you whatever resources we have, like for example, whatever resources we have, if we all consume, then what will be will be left for the coming generation? So, the third generation of rights actually talks about uh, the resources that we are using must be preserved. The life that we are living must be a quality life. The uh, people are not atomized. People are not isolated atoms. They enjoy life in the community. So these are actually are talking about the rights that can be enjoyed in collectivity. So the third generation of rights are actually form the group they actually form this sort of rights. These are also known as green rights, and they are mostly recognized. They are mostly we find that these rights are mostly demanded and acknowledged in 21st century. Right? Even if you remember that nowadays, until recently, we had the LGBT movements around the world are, all these movements are actually talking about this third generation of rights, because it's not only the two categories of human being. If you are talking about human being, it's not only about male and female, the two genders. There are many genders. Judith Butler talks about 6 genders in nature. So until recently, we have generally discarded the third gender from society, but now they are also uh, demanding their acknowledgement of identity and equal rights with regard to other men and women. So these rights actually demands that different forms of life must be recognized, and they all have equal right to participate in social life. So this three generation of rights actually, you know, all together forms the 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 whole of human rights. We cannot see them in isolation. So uh, in the next video, we'll discuss the discourses that are surrounding around these issues. Till then, thank you so much.